In a world full of distractions, there is one big question on every dog owner's lips.
How do I become more than just the person holding the other end of the leash?
We all get dogs with a dream in mind, a vision of the future. And if right now your everyday reality isn't quite that picture you had in mind, you are in the right place.
It really doesn't have to be this way.
You absolutely can and will be more to your dog than just the person who gets in between them and the world.
The key is you need to be more sexy.
More sexy than the neighbourhood cat.
More sexy than the jogger in the park.
More sexy than that half-eaten hamburger they just found on the floor.
And yes, even more sexy than the dog across the road.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Lauren.
Together we're Absolute Dogs.
And you're listening to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast, the podcast that teaches you how to make the best choices for your dog and unlock that freedom that you wanted that made you get a dog in the first place.
Now we're talking prong collars.
It's a spiky issue.
Spikily went into a shop in America. So
Yep.
I was in a shop in America. I went in and I was looking, typically being Lauren and Tom in America, I was looking at dog toys. And I couldn't help myself. It was like a Walmart or it was a big supermarket.
Yeah.
And I was looking at dog toys. And I turned my back to the dog toys and looked around at the other shelf. And there were these like massive spiky collars, like really cheap, like dollars, like not a lot of money. Very, very, very cheap, very easily available. Lots of prongs and lots of spiky bits and really freely, readily available. And so anyway, I turned and I said, Matt, what is that? And this lady said in her American accent, which I'm not going to try and do because I'm terrible at accents. She said, oh, that's a collar to stop him pulling. You just yank on him basically and you give him a whole big yank and he'll stop it. And it really can be very, very helpful. Maybe your dog is just like strong on the lead and you can just give him a good old hike, like do that to him. And I kind of looked and I was like, oh. And I said, I suppose it would help with like barking too. And she's like, yep, it would help with that as well. And I was like, and a dog that doesn't like dogs, absolutely. Like she was a really big sort of advocate for it. And she absolutely just another lady in the store. This wasn't a helper or anything. It's just another lady that was there. And she was definitely very willing to give me some advice. So in that moment, I kind of took a deep breath because I was like, right, I must not like go into like education mode here. I probably just need to have a think about this one, digest it a little, and maybe chat to everyone here about it, right?
Yeah. And so, we thought it was a good opportunity to talk about this because we get countless emails about how, someone has been recommended to use a particular tool like a choke chain or a prong collar.
Might be an electric collar, could be a spray collar, citronella collar, lots of different sort of weapons really or tools depending on who's calling it, a matter of perspective, but for me really quite damaging potential dog training equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we thought we'd kind of share with you what are kind of our top 5 considerations when it comes to considering these things. And as you know, we're not advocates of these things. We get real life results without that and by inspiring real life results.
And let's be honest, guys, we want you to all know that these are not things that we use. These are not things.
Take great pride in saying no to these things.
And these are also things that we can be really clear with you and everyone that this podcast will be able to go out to, that actually there is an way more fun way. There's an even better way. There's a much more exciting way to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of how you should use a prong collar, which we occasionally get those emails as well, which interesting.
Or even the other day I had someone that would like to explain why we should be using electric collar and how quick the effects are, and actually how they think that could help our dog training journey, Tom. And so that was one that we did get. So anyway.
So how to use a prong collar, stick it in the bin. So, what are we going to do instead?
In fact, it could be recycled.
It
could be recycled,
probably,
as in made into something much better.
Yeah, the recycle bin.
Yeah, recycle bin.
Yeah. Why do we feel this way? Well, first of all, when using pain to drive a behavior, okay, which is effectively what you're doing, using pain to drive behavior change there. And what we've got to realize is that in applying that pain, an animal's brain asks itself the question, okay, I somehow let this happen and pain, and I felt pain, what predicted that pain so I can try and avoid it in the future? And the challenge is that we think, in inflicting that pain, that dog is going to understand, I don't know, I just pulled on the lead, therefore I won't do that again. That's highly unlikely. That's what they're going to come to realize.
I remember my late dog, Reef. He was a very goofy border collie, and he was, as a young dog, he was running along like a track, and it had electric fencing both sides. Now, I was unaware of the electric fencing. It was stock and horses, so I had sheep and horses in the fields either side, and I just was blissfully unaware, to be honest. I wasn't really thinking stock and sheep, and I probably wasn't thinking maybe as clued up as I needed to be in that environment. Anyway, I was walking along, and he didn't chase sheep and he didn't chase ponies, so I didn't have any concerns. He was just merrily sort of trotting along. I was about to say hacking. We've gone into Mason mode. I was merrily like letting him just trot along, really. And he suddenly let out this almighty sort of like scream. He'd obviously touched the fence, and he legged it, and he legged it all the way home. Anyway, for a few weeks, Reef wouldn't go past trees, and I couldn't work it out how he had associated that with a tree. But actually, where he was sort of got stung, whatever you want to call it, was right next to a massive oak tree. And actually, for me, I was like, no, surely it would be the fence that he acknowledged, or maybe like the smell or the place. No, he was fine. All of those things were fine. It was being underneath a tree. So anytime he would just go wild, and it's funny because being a male, he would always have usually gone and weed up trees, but actually he no longer wanted to go anywhere near them, even though his power, like that was one of his drivers. He loved that, to go up and weed near trees. So for me, this was a massive like wake up moment of he did not associate that with what I thought he would.
Now, what we've got to realize then is that two things could happen as a result of using this prong collar. The first one is that you're walking down the street, tugging away on that prong collar, spikes into the neck, and your dog's seeing lots of things as they walk down the street that they're learning are predictors of the pain.
And remember, even whether you're doing one big old yank, like the lady advised, or whether you're doing tiny, subtle jerk, 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 don't pull, jerk, 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 jerk. You know what? All of those are painful. And if you've ever had pain, whether it's a dull pain, Matt's just had a nightmare with this like lower like back sciatica type thing, and he's like, it's a dull pain all the time at the moment, and it's really upsetting. Versus a tooth pain, both of those pains are not good, right?
Exactly.
So it's actually not good either, whether you're yanking or whether you've got that constant it's around my neck and it's a dull pain constantly there because you're just going to keep sort of gently nudging it.
And so what we've got to realize is that could happen. Alternatively, there's another option that could happen, and that is that your dog kind of gets used to the pain. They get habituated to it. They kind of just see it as normal. And in the attempt to try and then drive the behavior change, what happens is you try and do it more. You do it harder. You do it more frequently, right? You do it more vigorously. And in turn, what's happening is actually, we're escalating this, and more pain is being inflicted on your dog. And the only, other option is that they revert to option one, which is they start to look at the environment and say, oh, that tree over there predicts pain, that man over there predicts pain, that dog over there is a predictor of pain. And we damage their relationships with the whole world as well as their relationship with us.
Now, ultimately, you guys that know Absolute Dogs well, and the Training Academy and Sexier Than a Squirrel and Pro Dog Trainer, all of the things that we strive for at Absolute Dogs, you guys know that optimism is a way of life. So when we put that dull pain, sharp pain, constant pain, infrequent but varied pain into our dogs' everyday life and everyday truth, actually, how are we damaging their optimism? How are we damaging their everyday interactions? How are we damaging how they feel about the world? Like, how are we damaging that?
And so we've got to think about the alternative. And a question that I'll often ask myself, and you'll find this useful, I'm sure, is when we're wanting to change the behavior of an animal, whether it be a human, a dog, a horse, or whatever, ask yourself the question, right? am I driving this behavior change through push, or am I driving it through pull? In other words, is the animal being pulled towards the right choice and actively getting suction to it and wants to do it and is inspired to do it? Or are they being pushed to do that choice? And that, in how you answer that question kind of determines then whether the strategy that you're using is the best strategy or not. When we inspire great behavior through games, what we're doing is we're putting value into amazing choices. We're giving them the skills. They're inspired to do it. They actively want to do it. They actively seek out the right choice, whether the right choice be walking on a loose leash or coming back when called. They're suctioned to do it, and they see it as a privilege. That's what you get when you take that games-based brain reshaping approach, and that you'll always answer that question with my dog is being pulled to do that right behavior. They're getting suctioned to that right choice.
I think it's really important you also acknowledge for you if something feels good.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I was probably in my late teens and we were walking a dog with a friend, and the dog was screaming on lead and really pulling and screaming. Very excited little dog. Lovely little dog, actually. And what she said was, if this was my dog, what I would do, and we were dog walking, she said, if this was my dog, what I would do is I'd use training discs. And I said, training discs? I haven't seen training discs. And they sound quite cool, right? Like training discs sounds like cool, like sort of like frisbee or like disc training. I was like, nice. Show me. And with that, she pulled out this set of I think they were Mickey dog training discs, and no, don't go and find them. She pulled them out. Thank goodness I haven't seen them for a long time, actually. I bet they're probably still available, but yeah, again, don't look for them. And so pulled them out, and she threw them in front of this little dog, and they hit the ground really fast, and they made a big noise.
Huge noise.
And for that little dog, she hit the deck, she backed out of her collar, and then she legged it. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was like, flipping hell, what on earth sort of learning is that for a dog? Like that, it was dramatic. It was massive. Anyway, she then couldn't get hold of the dog because the dog was, as you can appreciate, a bit worried. And she then was trying to capture said dog. I was sort of kneeling on the ground and hoping that this little dog didn't really bolt because the dog was scared. She managed to catch the dog, and with that went to do it again. And I had to say in that moment, you know what, this absolutely, I'm out. Like, I do not want to be part of this. I don't want to be around for this. This is not the way to do it. And in the same way, the dog started screaming in the same way, but now backing up screaming rather than pulling forward screaming. So it was literally scary to watch how quick the transition was and how fast the dog learned, actually, I'm going to back out and bolt rather than pull forward and scream. Like, it wasn't, neither was better, right? And at the same time, what damage to confidence we can see in such a short period of time.
So guys, I guess, what we're going to do is you sent us a question, and I guess what we're going to do is fire a question back at you. With every interaction that you have with your dog, with every training opportunity, with every desire to change their behavior in some way, let's actually get them to pull towards the behavior. Let's get them to be inspired towards that, get suctioned to that right choice, and always be asking ourselves the question, am I pushing my dog to do this, or are they being pulled to do it through the teaching that I am giving them?
Now, if you want to see this and you want to watch more videos and you're not already part of our community, we'd love you to be able to watch this, do this, have a go at this. I know so many of you out there already are. You're part of the training academy or pro dog trainer, Sexier, Squirrel. What's the best way, Tom, for someone to get involved at the beginning?
So the best way, I would say, is to go and have a look at the Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge. It's 25 days of games. You do a game a day, and it's going to help with all those struggles that we talked about, whether it be a dog who's very engaged with the environment because they're worried about it or excited about it. It's going to grow focus. It's going to help with your loose leash walking. It's going to help with your recall. And you can find out all about that at absolutedogs.me/sexy so that you can become sexier than a squirrel. That's absolutedogs.me/sexy.
Now that's going to take you on a whole new journey. And whilst we would never want to take away anyone's choice, we really hope to always inspire and transform, and most of all, guard your dog's optimism and your own.
Absolutely. So with that, guys, that was this episode of the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast. If you've not already subscribed, make sure to subscribe. If you've not ever left us a review, make sure to leave a review. You can do that over at Apple Podcasts, for example. That really gives context for other people to get this learning and have amazing relationships with their dogs. We'll see you next time. And remember, stay sexy! Hey, before you go, have you taken part in the worldwide Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge?
It's a 25-day online video program, huge energy, amazing community, and over 6,000 people are already taking part.
The only question is, you know where you are today, where do you want to be 25 days from now? Head to absolutedogs.me/sexy.